Let's go over here.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Sorry.
We talked earlier about the best games for younger people to play as an avenue for education. And so this is sort of a two-pronged question. I was wondering if there were any actually board games that you would suggest to sort of initiate the sort of collaboration and diplomacy that like massive online multiplayers do, like Risk or Diplomacy, something like that. And then Denver talked a little bit about simulation as an avenue for education, and I was just asking if he could talk a little bit about the power and role that like structured simulation initiatives like Model UN, Model Arab League, Mock Congress can do to help those education initiatives.
Do you want to go first?
Great question. I can.
Sure, go.
Yeah.
I don't have. I feel bad, and maybe there's other audience members that can help contribute ideas. There are great games out there. I think if you do a little bit of looking, you can find them. There's great educational tools. And a lot of them, I think, the kind of exercise I was describing, you don't actually need a product. I think what's nice about the Constitution is that we have all these great biographies of the delegates. And so I think that it allows students to, if we do role-playing exercise, that they can really research and learn about this person, learn about their instincts. And as we were talking about, in terms of simulating the game, thinking about how they might behave. And I think then they learn firsthand the issues, the difficulties that the historical actors were running up against. But you might have more specific suggestions.
So I would like to point you back to the National Archives. They have some wonderful programs with wonderful game-like activities.
They do,
I'm not sure for what ages, but the ones I heard about earlier were amazing. What ages are you thinking about for looking for a game?
Anything under the age of 18?
Oh, 18. So Diplomacy is a game you mentioned. That is a great example of a game with negotiation and backstabbing, which is a thing that happens in politics, I've heard. There's also a great game by two game designers here in the audience on Kickstarter right now called The Partisans, which is about negotiating and moving a government in a path that you want it to go on, which I think is great. Obviously, I'm publishing it. And that was pretty subtle, right?
Subtle plug.
Subtle plug. Those are good negotiation games. Any of the secret role games, I think, are good. Secret role games are games where you all have a role and you're trying to figure out who you are. I'll get back to you with some other answers, because I know I have a bunch.
Yeah. I'll throw one out just because it's an interesting example, although I also have a conflict of interest. I'm on the advisory to a group called iCivics, and this is actually a set of games that came out of Justice Sandra Day O'Connor's work to raise more awareness around the courts, and it's become, by some measures, the leading civics curriculum, as in it's in more schools than other major like texts and things. Because teachers want to engage their students with a lot of this content, and they've made a whole suite of games, even around things like Do I Have a Right? That's one of their games. So there's an interesting question about, like, we as a democracy, should we be investing in the education of our children in terms of making games that pull people through? For the most part right now, we really struggle to fund schools in terms of that kind of the infrastructure of buildings and teacher salaries, and what's left over for really interesting simulations is really, really tiny. To me, this part of a conversation like this can also raise questions about how much of an investment are we making in the infrastructure to teach young people civics. I think it's tiny, and much more could and must be done. And I think games are a great place to say we should be asking for that.
Yeah, I will say that all the geography I learned pre-college was from board games. So even if you play a board game that doesn't have an obvious political slant, you're going to start to realize the borders of Poland changed from World War II, right? It's going to be a thing that you learn.